My name is Michael Drake. I am the Assistant State Engineer over Adjudication in the State Engineer's Office, also known as the Utah Division of Water Rights. We have several different people from the state of Utah represented here. We have the State Engineer, Teresa Wilhelmsen, back here, and then kind of just going through the room, Sarah Schechter with the Attorney General's Office, and Mark Stilson, Region Engineer, that has responsibility for this area, and Cash Stallings also back here working with Mark, and we'll be in and out, but Ryan Broadbent works with me. I think he's taking a phone call right now from a water user. And then we also have representing the Navajo Nation, Jolynn and why am I forgetting your name? Robert. I know your name. It's like all of a sudden it just left my brain. I'm sorry. Robert, representing the Navajo Nation. So welcome, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Are there any initial questions that anyone has? We're going to try and answer a lot of questions, and I'll stop at various times throughout this. If you have a very specific question, it might be best to wait, and then we have a lot of people here that can answer questions. If you have questions about what we're presenting, feel free to raise your hand. I can stop and we can answer those. But anything before we get going? Okay. Who's received a letter in the mail from us? I know you guys did. You did, yes? Okay. All right. That's just good to know. That kind of gives us some information about maybe what your property is or what your water right situation might be. So that's good information. Okay, so today we're gonna give a little water right overview and an adjudication overview, and then we're going to talk about the Navajo Nation water rights settlement. And we're excited about that. That's really why we're here today, is that settlement that was recently completed. And then we're going to talk about the adjudication process, anticipated timeline. I think we've done this 3 times now, and we feel like we're going to talk about the timeline a little earlier this time. It makes a lot more sense, and so you'll see that pop up a little earlier than where it's listed there, and then we can take questions. You can see an email address there. That email address comes right to my phone, and so if you want to reach me and ask me a question separately or any time through this process, you can email that. It should be on your paperwork, and you can email that too. There's a slide in here that also has my direct line. And so my direct email, and you can contact me that way, as well as a few other staff members that work with me. Okay, so you all have the paperwork, and you're probably wondering, what is a general stream adjudication? Well, that's probably question number 1. So it is an action in state district court, all right, and a general stream adjudication joins and binds all water users and the state engineer into a court case, a state court case. It's all governed by a section of state code, that's Title 73, Chapter 4, and the whole purpose of this is to determine the nature and extent of all the water rights in a given geographical area. And you can see from this map that we have the state of Utah broken up into all sorts of different little basins. These are all the various adjudications that are running. So you can see every corner of the state of Utah is under a general stream adjudication right now. Some of these have been running for a long time. They go back into the 1920s. But water rights are very complicated, so it takes some time to get to this. We're here and we're working on this now. All right, so what is a water right? A water right is the right to divert and beneficially use water in the state of Utah. Some of the defining elements that you'll see regarding a water right are the nature of use, and that's what you're using it for. Some of the most common natures of use are domestic, irrigation, stock watering. You'll also see municipal, and then we have another category which captures everything else. Every water right also has a priority date. This is the date that the water right was first placed to use. And then they all have a quantity of water, and that's usually measured by either the flow rate, or the cubic feet per second, or by volume. And it's kind of a strange unit called an acre foot that we measure that by. And then every water right has a point of diversion, and that's the location you take the water from the natural environment. That could be a well, or that could be a diversion off of a stream or a creek or a spring or something like that. And then each water right has a defined place of use, where that water right is being used. So you can see a couple pictures of some examples. It's very varied what a point of diversion or what a water right looks like. Those are some general sort of evidence of a water right. Okay, so why do we conduct general stream adjudications? I noted that a general adjudication brings and joins all water users into one court case. Well, the reason this is so important is because of the nature of water uses in the state of Utah, particularly when it comes to the use of water before the very first state water laws came into place. And so the first water laws came into place in 1903, but they only addressed surface water. They didn't address underground water. That didn't come until 1935. Well, there's a long history of water use that happened prior to that, and we need to capture that somehow. General stream adjudications are the way that we do this, and so that's one reason it's really important. Article 17 of the Utah State Constitution says that all existing rights to the use of any of the waters in this state for any useful or beneficial purpose are hereby recognized and confirmed. And so Utah became a state in 1896, and so it was recognizing all of those uses that happened prior to that time. So in different parts of Utah, settlement happened at different times, and so but a lot of these areas were settled prior to statehood, and so the Constitution recognizes all of those rights. We need to somehow get those rights onto the records so that they can be part of the big picture. And so that's what the adjudication does. I see a question.
In that big picture, because I'm just trying to get the history of it. So prior to the 35, so they just want to keep track of them, or they just want to give those people their certificate saying you're good?
Yeah. Well, the state, and it's a state engineer's mission, but it's also in the interest of the state of Utah to manage these water resources. And so we want to go and capture and bring all of those onto the records of the state engineer so that we know where they are, so that we can manage this big picture water system. Right? We live in a very arid state. Yeah. And so scarcity of water is just something we live with. And so we need to know who really is trying to divert water, where is it going to, what's it being used for, so that we can correctly plan for droughts like we happen to be in right now.
Oh, okay.
And or when we do get water, what happens with it? Who gets it and where does it go? Those are things we need to know. We only know that when we know who has water rights throughout the state. So, does that make sense? Okay. All right. Another big aspect of bringing all parties into the same room is federal reserve rights, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. And what this is where the Navajo Nation water rights settlement comes into play. All right. So this was established by a court case and case law that is referred to as the Winters Doctrine. And what it says is that when the federal government reserves land from the public domain for a given purpose, they also reserve sufficient water for the purposes of that reservation. All right, now the problem there is that here we have the federal government, and water rights are a state issue. And so how can we as the state bring the federal government into a state-based lawsuit? Typically, states don't get to sue the federal government. The McCarran Amendment changes that for water rights. So what we are, by the McCarran Amendment, we're able to summon the federal government into a state-based water right adjudication so that we can settle these water rights. This is important for the Navajo Nation water rights settlement because this is how we're going to bring that into the overall Utah water right picture and recognize the Navajo Nation's federal reserve rights. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. So We'll walk you through what the agreement is and how it affects water use on the nation. All right, other reasons we do adjudications. Water rights can be very contentious sometimes, and they can lead to a lot of lawsuits. An adjudication condenses this into one lawsuit, and so we tend to resolve all of these issues in this one case, and now everyone has a clearer picture of things going forward. We also do look, and this, I need to kind of put a caveat here, that we do look for water rights that are underused or unused. So for state-based rights only, they could be subject to forfeiture if they're not used. Forfeiture does not apply to the Navajo Nation water right, the Federal Reserve right. It's exempted from that. All right, but it is something we're going to be looking at with other water rights. And then finally, the big reason we do this is to get a decree, a comprehensive decree. Comprehensive meaning we get everything in there, so we have this full big picture understanding of water use in the area. Are there any questions so far? Okay. All right, let's talk about the Navajo Nation water rights settlement. So a lot of work's gone into this, and a great partnership has been established between the three sovereigns in this: the state of Utah, the Navajo Nation, and the federal government. Negotiation on this began in 2003. Negotiation is Utah's preferred method of settling these federal reserve rights. So even though the federal government reserved these water rights, they're undefined. We don't know what they are. Some states have decided to litigate them. Some states, like the state of Utah, negotiate with the other parties. So from 2003, we negotiated with the federal government, with the Navajo Nation, and an agreement was reached in 2015. That agreement was ratified by the federal government in December of 2020, and then the state ratified the agreement in the 2021 legislative session. And you can see there the two bills that address this issue. So what's in the agreement? The water rights settlement details that the Navajo Nation will have the right to divert 435 CFS cubic feet per second of water, amounting to 81,500 acre feet of depletion. So depletion is how much water can be consumed in that use of water. That's a lot of water. That water is broken into 4 different blocks with corresponding priority dates. These priority dates correspond to the reservation date of specific blocks of land that form the Navajo Nation. All right. Also included in the agreement is funding for water development projects in the Utah portion of the Navajo Nation. The state of Utah has dedicated $8 million for these purposes. The United States of America has dedicated over $200 million for water development projects. So that's part of the agreement. Some of the benefits that come along with this agreement is this is going to lead to clean drinking water projects for the Navajo Nation, and that's a great thing. It avoids costly litigation and uncertain outcomes for all parties involved. Where these federal reserve rights have been litigated, you never quite know what you're going to get at the end of it. And so by negotiation, we can avoid some of those uncertain outcomes. And we all have a stake in that. It also removes a significant unknown from the Colorado River system. We all have probably read the stories. The Colorado River is a big story right now, especially with this ongoing drought. And removing that unknown of what the Federal Reserve right is a big deal for the state of Utah, for the Navajo Nation, for all involved. It establishes a partnership on the Colorado River between the Navajo Nation and the state of Utah. And the agreement does protect existing state-based water rights. And that was important for the state of Utah. And so it does protect existing rights. It also protects and it will quantify existing rights within the Navajo Nation. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So this is the Navajo Nation Subdivision Adjudication boundary. It very closely conforms to the exterior boundaries of the Navajo Nation. We wanted to make this as tight as possible so that we deal with primarily issues related to the Federal Reserve rights, although we know there's a few of you that get lumped in with that. So we're excited to have you to the party. Are there any questions up till now? Now we're going to jump into the timeline. And there's some pop-ups that'll go. And so yeah, if you're taking pictures, you may want to capture each one of them. This is our planning timeline that we're working with. And it walks us through each step of the adjudication process. I'm going to go into greater detail in a minute to talk about each of these. It's important to recognize at this point that there's a bit of a divergence here. We need to kind of talk about a state-based right that's within this boundary, and then a right that is on Navajo lands. So if you're using water exclusively on Navajo Nation lands, then you are not going to have to participate directly in this adjudication. However, if you're using a water right, diverting water on non-Navajo Nation lands with a state-based right, you will need to participate in this adjudication. So I hope that's clear enough. So there's kind of two ways to look at this, right? So the very first step, and what has already happened, and is what prompted all of you to come here today with us this afternoon, is the summons was sent out. This was sent out on the 16th of March. You probably received it very shortly thereafter. The summons was also published in the San Juan Record. And at the same time also, shortly thereafter, we summoned the federal government, which is a necessary part to include to enact the McCarran Amendment and include them in this adjudication so that we can settle the Navajo water right, Federal Reserve right. So that's already happened. Right now, we're on our last one, last public meeting. It's been a great couple days to meet with people. And so we've held, this is our fourth public meeting, and we've met in Monticello, in Blanding, in Aneth, and now in Monument Valley. Next up is to sign a conformed agreement, and we're still working on the details of this. We're trying to coordinate the schedules of some very busy people, but we're expecting to have a signing ceremony sometime in the next couple months, April, May, maybe June, and the representatives from the three sovereigns will come together and sign the agreement, and that's going to be a big day. All right, after that, and again, we'll go into more detail on this. This is the point where if you have a water right that's a state-based water right, and so you divert water not on Navajo lands, but on a state-based parcel or a private parcel, you will need to file a water user claim. And so on May 3rd, our plan is to send out the notice to file claims. And that will start a clock, a 90-day clock, that you will need to submit a water user's claim. When we send that notice, if you have a state-based water right, you will receive a partially completed water user claim in the mail. And you'll need to complete that and send it back. Or if there's a change, you can make a change to that form. So that's going out then. All right, then we'll enter into the claim evaluation period. And again, this is where we're going to take two separate approaches depending on whether you have a state-based right that's being used on non-Navajo Nation land, or whether you have a Navajo Nation water right or use of water on Navajo lands. All right, so if you have a state-based right, the state of Utah will come out and evaluate the right sometime over the next couple years. Simultaneously, the federal team will prepare a hydrographic survey within the Navajo Nation to characterize all existing uses of water on Navajo Nation lands. Okay, so hopefully you can see the two sides here. There's the state-based side and then the Navajo Nation side. State of Utah is going to be focusing on the state side water rights and state side, and then the state and private lands. The federal government will focus on those Navajo Nation lands.
Will that be online?
Ultimately, the Hydrographic Survey Map, yeah, it will be made available at some point. It's gonna be a big mapping product, and so
Huge
it'll
project.
take some time, yeah. Yeah, but I'm sure it will be made available. Okay, so this is part of a bigger piece. I just wanted to talk about this real quickly. We call this whole area the Southeastern Colorado River Adjudication, and the Navajo Nation is a part of that. And there are areas within this adjudication which are undone. Monticello and Blanding and Bluff all sit in these areas. We are not adjudicating those areas right now. We are focusing on the Navajo Nation boundary that you see here represented. And it very closely conforms to the exterior boundaries of the nation. All right, so let's talk about the process. So this process, while it includes the Federal Reserve right for the Navajo Nation, a lot of the coordination is going to be done through our federal partners. All right, so a lot of this process applies more to the state-based water rights that we're going to be working with. You can see there's 3 different colors. That represents the 3 different phases of the water right adjudication. The first one is the one that we're in the middle of right now, and it runs us through the notice and the summons and today's public meeting, and it will end with the notice to file claims, which will go out on May 3rd for all general parties. The second phase is the list of unclaimed rights. We'll take all of those and we'll compare the claims to all of the known water right holders and prepare a list. And then there will be a final summons. There's going to be another public meeting, and then a decree on that list. And we'll go into a little bit more detail in a minute. The third phase is the claim evaluation period. So this is where we evaluate each and every claim. We come out, we take a look at it, and we form a recommendation. All of these recommendations get put together in a proposed determination. This is where the 2 sides will meet, the state-based water rights and the Navajo Nation Federal Reserve right will come together into this proposed determination that represents what the water rights are for this entire geographical area, that map that we've seen already. Okay, so let's go into a little bit more detail on each stage. I've talked about a lot of this already. We've already sent out the commencement. We've already sent out the summons. We're holding a public meeting right now. So the next step is that notice to file claims. If you have a state-based right, this is where you will need to file a water user claim. Just a minute. Excuse me. I've been talking a lot today. So 90 days to file that water user claim. It is really important if you have a state-based right, remember, if you have a state-based right to file a claim at this time. Failure to file a claim at this time could result in you never being able to submit a claim in the future. All right, so it's very, very important to submit a claim at this time. If you have a state-based right. If you are using water on the Navajo Nation, all of this will be taken care of separately because of the unique status of the Navajo Nation. All right, this is an example of a water user claim, and I've said some of this already, but a partially completed version will be sent to all owners of state-based water rights. All right, and so if that matches up with what you know of your water rights, simply sign it and send it back to us or file it with the court. If you received one of our notices because you're a property owner, you may receive a blank form. If you have struggles completing that form, give us a call. We can help you work through that so that we can document your water usage. Claims are only required on perfected rights. Perfected rights include rights with certificates, diligence claims, decreed rights, underground water claims, and definitely Federal Reserve rights. All right, the second phase is the list of unclaimed rights phase. We're going to take all these claims, we're going to compare it with our records, where we have a water right that we have a record of that we don't then we don't receive a claim, it gets put on this list, and we petition the court to abandon only those rights for which no one is there to claim them. Okay, that's, if for some reason we mistakenly put a right on there, you can object within 90 days following that. We'll hold another public meeting at this point and communicate with people in the area. Okay, and then moving on to the third phase. This is where it kind of comes to the climax of the adjudication process. We review all these water rights, we prepare a proposed determination, and this lists what we think the water rights are good for on each and every water right. And we file that with the court, and we send notice to all of the water users in that proposed determination. And you can object for 90 days following that. If there's something that is wrong, something that you don't agree with, you can object at that time. We hold another public meeting. You can see we hold lots of public meetings to make sure that we communicate with everyone. And then we begin at that point, at the end of those 90 days, to resolve the objections to the proposed determination. Once we've done that, we petition the court to decree the proposed determination, and that's when the water rights become decrees. And decreed water rights are the gold standard of water rights. It's a very strong position on a water right. Are there any questions on that? I know that's a lot of material, especially when it comes to the process.
So before this time, you organizing getting the decrees, so there are no decrees at all in Utah yet?
There are some decrees, yeah, and there's certainly areas that we have adjudicated and we've reached the end zone, of water rights, and so certain places, and that's ultimately what the adjudication is trying to do, is to go into an area, gather them all, evaluate them, and then decree them.
Right.
So
you just go on in each
yeah,
of the
so you
regions
could
and
see
get
on
it
that
done.
map a few slides back that we've done. We're finishing up the Moab area right now,
Okay.
and so we're about to complete with that, and given the agreement that was reached here, we wanted to get this done.
Right.
Teresa's made it one of her major goals for me to get this done, and so we're excited to do that.
So once we get our decree, aside from when we had to go, not me per se, but when the, when they went to go get the certificate or whatever they needed to be able to dig the well, the permit, outside of that, is there a cost?
There's no cost to participate in the adjudication.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's-
Nope. Yeah, so unless you decide that you need to hire an attorney or
Right.
hire an
that's-
engineer or someone like that, but
Imagine
to
industrial
interface
would-
with us, there's no cost, no.
Right. Yes.
Great question. Any other questions? I tried to anticipate a few questions, so I have a little quick answers, a little Q&A here. So a lot of questions come up here. You heard about the money that's being dedicated to water development projects. What water development projects are planned? That is something the Navajo Nation has responsibility for, and so they're evaluating which projects to pursue. Robert is here. He knows a lot of this information, and he can fill that in if you have questions. But that's something that the Navajo Nation will continue to evaluate over the coming years, and put that money to good use.
Do you or he know anything about, like, locally here? Because the other side of the mesa, a lot of people don't have actual water, and they were gonna bring from Canada, but they never seem to have done that.
Yeah,
They laid all that pipe.
okay, yeah, this is on the Arizona side, right on the other side of the
Right,
mesa.
uh-huh,
Yeah, part of the things that we're doing is working a lot with NTA and IHS, water development on the Navajo Nation is basically, IHS gets the money, they build the pipelines, and then they turn it to the nation, and NTA operates it. Basically, that's the way it works. In recent years, the Navajo Nation has stepped up with funding from Sehasin, Permit Trust Fund, and hopefully ARPA dollars and the CARES Act dollars and stuff like that to work on a lot of these projects. So we're helping one another in terms of NTA, IHS, BIA, and Water Resources to get projects built, the distribution system built even further. The way IHS works its water development is that they have this thing called the sanitation deficiency system. So it's kind of like a point system. So if you live 10 miles out of the way, and if they design a project to run a 2-mile or 2-inch pipeline to your house and you're the only one that's there, it's like a losing, it's not feasible is what it is. But if there's like 15 families that live maybe a mile, 2 mile, 5 miles from the nearest water lines, that becomes feasible. So those types of projects go to the top. So there's, for the Navajo Nation, there's over close to $400 million. If people had money, we could throw $500 million and every sanitation deficiency system project can be built on the Navajo Nation. But the way it is we have like over 700 and something projects that's on the Navajo Nation that needs water. So every year the federal government allocates money to the the IHS for the sanitation deficiency system project. And that funding source has dwindled over the years. Now it's around 20 million. So
And you still got
usually
700.
usually the top 3-4 projects get built and everybody moves up.
Okay.
But essentially what happens is you build 4 or 5 more come to the list.
Right.
So it's like a never-ending thing. So but there are ways that the nation and IHS and NTA are trying. We're doing cost sharing, cost allocation, where we're matching dollars. So we bring in matching dollars from the Navajo Nation, matching dollars from the state, matching dollars from Water Smart or EPA, and then matching dollars from IHS. That makes a viable project. But you have to coordinate and play nice with everybody, and everybody else is in this giant
So they
field.
had funds to put pipes out, and they're just waiting for the next people to come in to get the
Or
water.
we all just, one source of funding would do the design and pre-development, and then IHS would do the construction, and then somebody else would finish it off. Or somebody else will drill the well and equip it, run in the power lines. The biggest thing is right-of-ways.
Right.
So it's right-of-ways on the Navajo Nation, and environmental clearances or any kind of clearances takes years. So it's a huge battle, but there are ways to do a lot of these things. So and I can talk about it later when this meeting's over. So.
Appreciate that, Mel. The next question is, maybe I'm putting my stepping in someone else's shoes here, but I didn't receive a summons. Was I missed? I talked about the unique nature of the Navajo Nation. Due to that nature, a relatively small group of people received the summons that we sent out. The summons that was sent to the federal government addresses all existing uses on Navajo Nation lands. And so the only parties that we summoned are those that don't fit that definition. And so if you have a state-based right on non-Navajo Nation lands, you received one of our notices. And so if you don't fit that bill, that's probably why you didn't receive it. So it's a relatively small group of people. Where we do this in more populated areas, sometimes we have 10,000 people that we send notices to. But in this area, because of this unique nature, it's that. And so it's important to remember that all uses of the water on Navajo Nation lands is going to be covered by that summons and the notice to file claims that will be submitted by the federal government. Okay, stepping into some other shoes. I'm a Navajo Nation member. What is my responsibility in the adjudication? Unless you own a state-based water right, the Department of the Interior, the federal government, and the Navajo Nation will represent you in the adjudication. And we have a very good working relationship with the Navajo Nation and with the federal team that's working on this. And so everyone is committed to having this move forward. And so we're continuing to talk with them. We have about a meeting every other month or about every 6 weeks or so to discuss this. And so we're well underway on that. Stepping into some other shoes, let's say I own a water right in Bluff or Blanding or Monticello. What is my responsibility in the adjudication? Unless you own a state-based right within the adjudication boundary, you do not need to file a water user claim. And so we're only adjudicating this area right now. Remember that map that I showed you earlier? It's just the exterior boundaries of the Navajo Nation. And so if you happen to be inside that area with property, private property or a state-based right within that area, you would participate in this adjudication. Okay, so I own a water right outside of the Navajo Nation adjudication boundary. What should I do to prepare? Well, if you do have a water right and you're outside of the Navajo Nation boundary, then you would want to make sure that your water right is being used fully. That's one way you can prepare. Also, make sure your title is correct. That's one thing that causes a lot of problems is when we come into an area and title is not updated. We don't know who to talk to about the water right. If you have concerns about that, you can contact us and we can help you update your state-based water right title or address or contact information. Question that comes up is, will I lose my water right? It's important here to kind of, again, differentiate the two different responses. Navajo Nation Federal Reserve rights are not subject to forfeiture or loss. They're protected from that. And so only water rights within the adjudication boundary are being adjudicated, and so it's only those state-based rights within that we'd have to pay attention to that and make sure that the water right's fully in use so that we can recognize it.
What does fully in use mean? Like we have a certain amount that we can draw. Do we have to use all of that or will it be reduced?
What it means is, and it's a great question, sometimes us water right employees kind of get into these definitions that are commonplace for us, but I know it's hard to understand. In use for a water right means that those beneficial uses, and so whether it's irrigation, domestic, or stock watering, or whatever it is that your water right says you can use your water right for, whether those are fully in use. That's what we're going to be looking for.
Fully meaning
so if you have an acre of irrigation, is there an acre of land being irrigated? If you have a water right for 100 animals, are there 100 cattle that are being watered? If you have a water right for 2 domestic units, are there 2 homes there?
So when you come in and do the inspection, that's what you're looking for?
That's what we're going to be looking for.
And we technically could have our, at the very end of the adjudication.
The
or whatever.
the proposed
The
determination.
decree.
The decree.
The decree.
So it,
After.
so we're going to write up. We're going to come out and we're evaluate it. And if we see all of your uses in place, your irrigation, your stock watering, your domestic in place, we're going to write up a recommendation that matches that, and then put that in the proposed determination, and then ultimately ask the judge to decree that.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So you're doing all your visitations before the judge sees the, okay.
Correct, yeah.
Got it.
So the way adjudication works, if you think back on that process, is the state engineer goes and reviews, makes a recommendation to the court looks at it, runs it through its legal process. If everything's good, decree.
So that's
So
part
this
of the
basically, in a lot of ways, limits future development.
Well, future development can still occur depending on the policy in the area. And so, Mark, what is the policy in this area? Open to small domestics. And so that's a separate issue. Those can continue to come in. So we're looking at existing perfected water rights right now. So if it's a pending application, you've submitted for a permit from the state engineer's office, and you're still working on it, you're going to submit proof at some future point, that's not what we're adjudicating.
So Mike, if I could just step in for a sec. So a decree on a proposed determination is basically the court looks at our proposed determination, which is a snapshot in time. What water rights are currently being used that have already been perfected, we're gonna tabulate those in this proposed determination. The court takes a look at what we've tabulated and says, I agree with that, and then enters a decree, basically judging that these water rights are legally valid and owned by the person on the list. Now, for future, the very next day, you could go and sell that water right to someone else, and they could change it for some other use. But as of that day, it's just that snapshot in time of what is happening right now.
Any other questions from anyone? Let's see if I have any other, no, that's kind of it. So that kind of brings us towards the end here. This is some more contact information, my email address, as well as that water rights _adjudication. Mark Stilson's contact information is here as well. That's how you can contact him. He's the region engineer that has responsibility over this area. Nick Yider was unable to come with us today. Had some late issues come up, but we also have Ryan that's here. You can contact us through these means of contact. And so, if you have questions, please let us know, and we can help you through this process. If you have problems completing your form, let us know. We can help you through that.